Hi everybody, so today we are going to be talking about diabetes insipidus. So diabetes insipidus is different than diabetes mellitus. And we're going to talk about that right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. So what happens in diabetes insipidus? Well, first of all, you're going to get excessive urination. Okay, and the excessive urination is called polyuria. The second thing that's going to happen is because you have excessive urination, people are going to have a tendency to drink a lot. So you're going to have excessive drinking. And we call this polydipsia. That's excessive drinking. Now, in diabetes mellitus, what happens is, that's with the blood sugar one, people have a tendency to eat a lot. In this case, there is no, and we call that polyphagia, right? Because they're constantly trying to replace the glucose that's not going to the cells. In this case, there's no polyphagia, or there's no excessive eating. Okay? It's not related to the amount of sugar in the blood. Okay, and last but not least, it's also not related, let me go like this. It's not related to blood sugar or type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Okay, now here's what's going to happen. Here's one of the signs of this. People who have this are going to make about 3 liters of urine a day. Okay, and if you don't know what that is, that's about 100 ounces. Okay, that's about 100 ounces. Okay, so that's basically describing it. Let's talk about what causes this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at normal function in the body. So this is going to be my brain, all right? And this is on someone who's facing that way. Down here, I'm going to put my pituitary gland. All right, this is the pituitary gland. And this is going to be the anterior pituitary, and we're not going to be dealing with the anterior pituitary today, but this is the posterior pituitary. All right, that's going to be the posterior pituitary. Now, in the brain, remember, this on someone facing this way. I'm going to draw this way up here, even though in actuality it's not way up here. And this is going to be the hypothalamus. Okay, that's the hypothalamus. And in the hypothalamus, you have something called osmoreceptors. And what osmoreceptors are going to do is they are going to measure basically the concentration of particles in the blood, or what we call osmolality. So they are going to measure osmolality. As the osmolality increases, in other words, as the concentration of water to particles increases, osmolality increases also. So when we get an increase in this, it's going to lead to an increase of being thirsty, and then the person is going to want to drink. But let's describe this just a little bit more real quick. So let's say this is my bloodstream here. This is going to be my bloodstream right here. Okay, so we have blood in there. Now, you have particles that are going to be in the blood, which is normal, right? So let's say these are my particles, and I'm going to put in here glucose, and let's put in here sodium, all right, as examples. So when we talk about particles, there's going to be glucose and it's going to be sodium. Then we're going to have our water and anything else that's in there. Then we're going to have our water molecules, okay? So I'm going to draw water molecules here. All right, and let's say this is the relationship between these two. Let's just say this is normal, right? So once again, the most common particles to have is going to be sodium chloride and glucose. Okay, and then what's going to happen now is as you become dehydrated, basically you're going to have less water molecules. So the concentration of particles increases, right? And therefore, that's an increase in my osmolality, right? So when there's an increase in osmolality or an increase in the number of particles in the blood in relation to water, what's going to happen is it's going to stimulate these osmoreceptors. The osmoreceptors then will cause you to become thirsty, and then you're going to drink. That's the way it should happen. Now, here's the other thing that's going to happen. Is also in the hypothalamus, you have a nucleus. And we're going to call this the supraoptic nucleus. And if you recall, a nucleus is a group of cell bodies. So there's my supraoptic nucleus that's right there. This is going to make a hormone that we call antidiuretic hormone, or also known as ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which is ADH. Remember, diuretic causes you to urinate, and antidiuretic retains water. Okay, so this is antidiuretic hormone, so it's going to help retain water. We're going to look at that in just a minute. Coming off of here, we have a group of axons that are going to come down to this posterior pituitary. Okay, and we're going to call this the supraoptical hypophyseal tract. Okay, and that's going to be right there. So this ADH now is going to come from the supraoptic nucleus, travel down the supraoptical hypophyseal tract to the posterior pituitary. From the posterior pituitary, it's going to enter into the bloodstream. All right, so now it's going to enter into the blood. Okay, and it's going to go to the kidney, which we're going to go over right now. All right, so let's take a look at how this works in the kidney. So let's go over here. And I'm going to draw a kidney real quick. So this is going to be my Bowman's capsule. This is going to be my proximal convoluted tubule. This is going to be my loop of Henle, my distal convoluted tubule. And then you have the collecting duct, which collects the urine, right? So I'm going to draw this here. Right, and that there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a really big cell on this side. Okay, now I'm just blowing up one area of this, so we're going to blow this up here and make it into a really big cell. Okay, so that's going to be just a collecting duct cell. So remember, you're going to have these all along here on the collecting duct, right? Then on this collecting duct, we're going to have these little receptors here, which we are going to call vasopressin receptors. Okay, so these are my vasopressin receptors. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have your bloodstream. And like we've already said, in the bloodstream, you are going to have ADH, right? Our ADH is going to leave the brain and come down here to the kidney, and now we get ADH in here. Antidiuretic hormone is in our blood. So now, here's what's going to happen, is inside of these collecting ducts, basically you're going to have proteins. And we're going to call these proteins aquaporins. So let's say these are aquaporins right here. The orange part is a vesicle. So inside the vesicle, we have aquaporins. And this is what aquaporins do. Is when ADH comes down, it's going to, and remember, it's being produced, we want to retain water. What's going to happen is the ADH is going to leave the bloodstream, and it's going to bind onto these receptors. When it binds onto these receptors, what's going to happen is that's going to activate these vesicles that have the aquaporin to basically fuse with the cell membrane. And when it fuses with the cell membrane, what it's going to do is it's going to embed this aquaporin in the cell membrane. Now I'm just going to draw this aquaporin as if it's embedded in here. Okay, so it's basically just pretend like it's over here just to make it easier to draw. So now, when we get that aquaporin right there, water that's in the urine, right, because it's going to be my urine, right, and remember, once again, this is my collecting duct, right? This water is going to go through the aquaporin and into the blood, and then we're going to increase the amount of water in the blood, which is going to decrease my osmolality, and therefore I get everything back to normal. That's the way everything's supposed to work. So let's take a look now at what happens in diabetes insipidus. So if we come back over here, and we're going to go right here. So the first type we're going to talk about is something that we're going to call central diabetes insipidus. Okay, central diabetes insipidus. So what happens in central diabetes insipidus is something goes wrong with the brain here. Okay, so I can have a problem with the hypothalamus. Now it could be disease, it could be trauma or something like that, which means I could also have a problem with the osmoreceptors. Okay. Also, what can happen is I could have a problem with the optic nucleus. There could be a problem with the supraoptic hypophyseal tract. There could also be a problem with the posterior pituitary. So what's happening here is either we're not making ADH or we're not getting it out of the brain. Okay, so ADH is not getting into the blood. But our kidney function and all of that is normal. Okay, so again, it's not getting into the blood. So this, and again, this could be due to we're not making it, we're not realizing we need to make it, we're not making it, we're not getting it down to the posterior pituitary, or there's just a problem in the posterior pituitary. So that's the first one, is going to be central diabetes insipidus. Let's take a look at the second one. And the second one, we're going to name nephrogenic. So this is going to be nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. Okay. Now what's going to happen here is there's going to be a problem with the kidney. So we're making enough ADH, but we have a problem with the whole thing going on here in the kidney. So there's a problem in the kidney. Okay. So now here's the thing that can happen. One, the receptors may not work. Properly. Okay, so that's one. Second, there might be a problem with the aquaporins. Okay, you may not have enough of them. They may not embed in the cell wall. They may not be able to transfer the water, but there's a problem with the aquaporins. So what can cause this? Well, it can be genetic. This goes for either of these two problems, right? It could be genetic. Somebody could have polycystic kidney disease. Okay, remember, DZ stands for disease. They could have hypercalcemia. Right? Too much calcium in the blood will cause this also. And then the other thing that can happen is they could have an increase in lithium. They might be taking medications that actually increase the amount of lithium, which will actually affect, which can actually cause this. So there's some problems there, but again, this problem now is taking place down here in the kidneys. Now here's another type. The third type is going to be gestational diabetes insipidus. So what happens when someone has gestational diabetes is they are going to secrete something called vasopressinase, which is an enzyme from the placenta. And what this enzyme is going to do is it's going to break down ADH in the blood. So now what's going to happen is remember, these are green are our ADH particles, or molecules. So what's going to happen is those are going to be broken down. Well, now I don't have enough ADH to stimulate these receptors. And so what's going to happen is you're going to get diabetes insipidus. The last one is going to have to do with what we call dipsogenic diabetes insipidus. So in this case, it's usually due to some type of mental disorder. It's also known as psychogenic polydipsia, but normally it's due to some type of mental disorder. It could be due to schizophrenia or something like that, right? In this case, the person just drinks too much. Okay, so what's going to happen here is the brain's going to function normal. It will secrete ADH when it's needed, but because they're drinking so much, they don't secrete ADH. But I'm going to put normal ADH function. Okay, they're not going to be secreting it because the person's drinking so much, but normal, that's normal. The ADH is still function normal. There's normal kidney function. Okay, but we still have the excessive urination and we still have the excessive drinking, right? So like we said, in this case, the person just drinks too much. Okay, so that's the causes of what causes diabetes insipidus. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will catch you next time.